This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry with agriculture broadcasters Orion Samuelson and Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH and your local Case IH dealer.
Farm policy discussions ramp up in D.C. and across the country as the elections get closer. Hello, everybody. Welcome to This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson here in the studio this week, but we'll be talking to Max Armstrong later on in the program. And happy Father's Day to all of you fathers and father figures out there. Of course, that is this weekend. And we're gearing up for more policy discussion here in this country, particularly in the agricultural space. One thing being watched in Washington, D.C. this next week is the vote out of the Senate Ag Committee for the Cattle Market Price Discovery and Transparency Bill. This is a hotly debated bill within the cattle industry, would set mandatory purchase requirements for packers. It has been under discussion for a better part of a year, and this next week it is expected to be voted out of the Senate Ag Committee, and Senator Charles Grassley, one of the authors of this bill, has said that it will likely get the chance to move to the floor of the Senate before the election time for a vote. Well, that's just one of the political issues under discussion. Another one, conversations are ramping up about the Farm Bill. Growers are planning for that here in this next congressional cycle. And Max thought it was time to get checked in and to see what farmers around the country were looking for in that next Farm Bill.
Yeah, Mike, it seems early, all right, to be talking about a new Farm Bill. I don't believe a new one is due until the end of next year. Nevertheless, as you know, lawmakers have been talking about it indeed, and so have farmers. We're pleased to have with us this weekend the president of the American Soybean Association, Brad Doyle. First of all, Brad, a crop report from your part of the world. How are the beans and other crops looking in Arkansas?
So the soybeans that were planted early look great. We are in a dry spell right now. There are a few fields being planted today, some that were wet. Field work was delayed, so wrapping up planting. We started cutting wheat yesterday here locally, and so we'll be cutting all day today, and so far the yield looks promising. And we've got rice that is being fertilized and put to a flood, so a lot going on here in my part of the world. The corn and cotton around is growing quite well as it should for this time in June, so great things going. We could actually use a little bit of rain even after all the rain delays this spring.
Since you mentioned wheat, let me ask, how have your members responded to the administration's call for more double cropping in 2023? What are they saying about it in your rank and file?
You know, wheat can be challenging in a rotation, so not everybody has the opportunity that we have here in the southern states. So we are more flexible to increase our acres. And, you know, to be honest, when soybean prices are strong, it's hard to put wheat in the rotation, but strong wheat prices will certainly have some farmers scratching their head this fall, whether they want to plant it or not.
Some of the bloom has come off that wheat, to be sure, but there are others who are saying, my goodness, there's a reason for me to look at it other than straw now, which has been rare at times in the past for some growers when you look in double crop territory. Let's talk a bit about the Farm Bill. What's the number one issue there that really matters for the Soybean Association?
So, Max, I would have to say crop insurance. Soybeans have about 90% coverage on what we grow every year. So it is crucial to have those tools in place. And that's what we've discussed since September. As an association, we reached out to our membership, to our affiliate members, and we've had a lot of farmer discussions. What needs to be added, what needs to be changed, what can we do to improve and reduce the risk on farm. But I think crop insurance and the ARC and PLC programs are vital for the health of family farms today.
Crop insurance has been kind of an elusive goal, it seems like. I remember when we were talking about getting rid of these ad hoc disaster bills, and responding to every disaster that comes along. We haven't been able to do that yet, have we? And crop insurance hasn't worked just right for everyone, has it?
It's not, and that's why we need choices, and it's a great partnership between the federal government and the private companies that offer it. So, it's discussions like these today and whenever you do need crop insurance that we need to fall back on when building out this new farm bill. We always want improvement that makes sense and that's affordable to everyone.
Brad, we'll check back with you in a few weeks. We want to stay in touch with you as we move toward that goal of getting a new farm bill. We appreciate you joining us this weekend here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Brad Doyle. He's the president of the American Soybean Association.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. And now it's time to take a look at the markets. A lot of factors coming together this time of year to move prices, and to help explain them is Jim McCormick of agmarket.net. Jim, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me on.
One of the big pieces of news was the Federal Reserve hiking interest rates. A half basis or a 50 basis point hike was expected. We got 75 basis points. Jim, what does that mean for the economy as a whole?
One thing as economy as a whole, it tells you that the Fed is definitely worried about the inflation. The reality is they were looking for a 50 basis point. Then we got the CPI number, and that was just red hot. And it forced the Fed's hand. They're going to have to raise it, again and again, probably to try to get it under control. Once this genie's out of the bottle, it's just very hard to get back in. So very simply, if you're a producer, the cost of money is going to get much more expensive, more unlikely. It's kind of a two-edged sword. The inflation will continue to get some inflationary buyers jump into the commodity market. But on the other hand, the Fed's goal right now is to slow down inflation. To do that, they're raising the cost of money. That will slow down the economy. Eventually, that could put us into, worst case, a recession, which in the long run would be negative pretty much everything.
Now, Jim, there is still a lot of global demand for commodities as a whole, and typically viewed as a safe place to put money in an inflationary spiral. Are we seeing the money cycle turn towards commodities?
Well, we have been seeing it turn toward commodities quite a bit, actually. The last year, year and a half, a lot of hype as this inflation has kicked in. You saw a lot of spec money come into the marketplace. Interesting enough, you noticed the last week and a half, we've had some pretty good downdraft days. And a lot of that they were saying was actually some of that spec money coming out of the market, because essentially the spec money that was coming out of New York is getting hammered on all fronts. The bond market's going against them. The cryptocurrencies are going against them. The stock market's going against them. So you're actually seeing some position lightening up, plain and simple, as a way to overall maintain just the control of their balance sheet.
Okay, and no doubt they're looking for good stories to put that money back in service too. Jim, looking at the corn market, where do you expect acreage to turn out here at the end of the month?
Right now, we believe it's going to get a little bit lower at this point in time. The reality is we struggled to get a lot of that northern Corn Belt acres in, as well as there's a few acres, actually parts of Ohio, that still did not get in because it's a little bit wet. So we would guess that acreage would be down closer to that 89 million acres. And that really makes it tough, because the reality is you need 89.5 million acres. That original acreage with a trend yield of 177, that ties last year's best crop just to meet the anticipated demand. So if you start dropping acres because we couldn't get that planted, it really puts the pressure for the trend yield to materialize. And when you look what's going on with the weather this past week and what's in the forecast, the longer range maps, that makes that trend yield of 177 look like it could be a stretch.
So, Jim, that seems to imply some bullish bias potentially later in the summer watching that yield. How should growers be handling their marketing of that crop that is in the ground?
Well, right now, I think if you're in the ground, it is a forecast. Our group is encouraging producers to lay off some of the risk. There's a lot of options out there. Use puts as one way, maybe sell some cash, and then use some maybe re-ownership short-term option strategies like the August or September short-dated calls to re-own the grain. Because the reality is, Mike, in the big picture, we're probably putting a multiple year high in. We don't know where it's going to be, but when this tops, it tops. Look what the crude oil market did. It spiked to $130. It's never looked at it. The way we're trading right now, we might have the first weaker monthly close we've had in about 6 months. So, you look at the lumber prices, they've free fall. So what does go up will come down. But, in the near term, the market will be focusing in on what is going to happen the next 4 to 6 weeks as we get into that critical pollination period.
Jim, before we let you go, ethanol demand has been strong. Do you see that being a key component of demand through the summer?
I think that will be a key component. I mean, the reality is this. The consumer went from being a consumption while we were locked down. They're now driving. And I think that's going to sustain us at least through the summertime as people say, look, I'm done with COVID. I want to go on vacation. So I think that should help the demand for ethanol.
All right. Lots of things to talk about here in the markets. We'll be back for more with Jim McCormick of agmarket.net. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. We're back talking markets with Jim McCormick of agmarket.net. Jim, you mentioned the ethanol demand on the corn side helping drive that balance sheet throughout the summer. I'm curious on the wheat side. Are we going to see international buyers come back for more U.S. wheat?
I think we have a good shot of it. Unfortunately, right now, with the world still, having a hard time getting grain out of Ukraine due to the war, the Ukrainians don't want to demine their port. Without them demining the port, I don't see there's any really good way to get that wheat out. That harvest is just picking up, so it's going to put the pressure on the importers to find different sources. So the odds are they will end up coming back to the United States. So it's going to be a little bit of tug of war price-wise, demand potentially from international buyers against the higher dollar, as well as just kind of normal harvest activity pressure. So we'll look for a little bit of choppiness, but the reality is until we get this Ukrainian situation taken care of, the world wheat supply is going to be tight. And there's one other thing I want to note. If you can't get this wheat sold and moved over the next couple months, then it becomes a financial issue of how do you finance next year's crop, which they'll be planning, when you think about it, just in a few months. So then that could drag into 2023. So it's something we need to watch.
Right. Could definitely have some spillover impacts that last longer term. Jim, on the wheat side, do you expect to see the harvest, the results start to increase as we get deeper into harvest, as it moves farther north?
You mean
the wheat yields?
The wheat yields, I think they will probably improve a little bit. I mean, the reality is the plains had the hardest, driest weather. You get to the soft red wheat in general, that crop pretty much has some pretty good moisture throughout the winter. So I would guess it would improve a little bit as it moves north.
All right, Jim, spring wheat. You mentioned the challenges getting corn acres in the ground in the Dakotas and Minnesota spills right over into spring wheat country. Does the market have a sense of what's coming in that market?
I don't think they're still questioning it right now. We know they didn't get the acres in. We're watching what the weather does there as well as in Canada. So it's a situation that, if that crop is small, it just puts more and more pressure on the world wheat prices. So it's something we need to keep an eye on.
All right, Jim, let's turn our focus over to the oil seeds. We saw the much anticipated crush number reported yesterday. We've seen a lot of demand for meal and oil. How did that turn out?
The crush number was okay. It was better. It was a little bit lower than the average trade guess, but it was much higher than it was a year ago. That would be expected because, plain and simple, the supply of beans is getting very, very tight. And the crushers are having a very hard time getting producers to move beans off farm. Same thing for corn right now. The producer that has old crop grain, he seems like he's willing to let it ride and get a little bit better peek of what this summer weather looks like, for the pollination and the pod setting. Then they'll let those final bushels go.
Jim, you mentioned ag market advice for guys with corn in the ground, 50% of it sold. What's your advice on the soybean side?
Same thing on the beans. We're recommending getting the beans marketed as well, and then maybe using options as a way to control risk, or at least get a floor on it. The reality is, like I mentioned before, there is a lot of downward risk in these markets. If this Ukrainian situation would get resolved, I think there's a lot of war premium, plain and simple, built into the marketplace. If the weather starts breaking, that's another thing. And then just lastly, the inflationary play. All tides lift, as they say, tides lift all boats. A lot of money has moved into these markets. If we would go into recession, a lot of money would come out of the markets, and that could also have a negative impact. So producers really need to get on their game and really think about marketing, not just this year's crop, but the 2023 crop as well.
Right. Sell when these prices are here. Don't be looking back at them wistfully. Jim, you mentioned the market has been volatile. It's been choppy. We might see some more of that next week because I understand the trade is closed Sunday night and Monday night. Is that right?
That is correct. It's a federal holiday, Juneteenth. It's the first one. It was signed a year ago. So yes, the markets will be closed Sunday night and Monday. They'll open up Monday night. So it's kind of our first 3-day weekend, summer volatility with a lot of heat in the forecast coming out of the weekend. It is probably going to set us up for some fireworks when we open back up Monday night.
Jim, due to the heat, cattle have been in the news recently. What's your expectation for cattle prices here over the summer? Right
now, I'm a little bit optimistic right now. I mean, the reality is we are worried about recession and, the high price of gas. But the fact of the matter is a lot of people are still going on vacation. They've been pent up for 2 years. They're willing to spend the money. The cash market's been moving up a little bit. We're also seeing some death losses, which has kind of got underpinning the market near term. But it's something just like the grain market. I think you got to be very cautious in the long run. If the economy does start to roll over, that would be a little bit negative to cattle.
Yeah, it certainly would. Jim McCormick at agmarket.net. Thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me on.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. Combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
Well, it's time to turn to technology, and I'm getting to the point where as I use all the small screens I have for my technology, it is getting harder and harder for me to read the print on them. Well, Chad Colby has an update, a new product that makes reading stuff on screens a lot easier.
Computer ecosystems, if you would, have changed so much over the years. The majority of us are certainly using laptops, and then when we get to our desk, we'll have an external monitor like you see here. Now, this new monitor that just came out from Apple, it's called the Studio Display. You can see here it's got one cord I plugged into my MacBook, and voila, we're in business. Now, it just came out about 5 months ago, and I just got mine. They offer two models, the Studio Display, which is the new one, and they've got the high-end Pro XDR display. I won't talk about that one. That's way out of most of our budgets. But this new display is really incredible. It's got a really advanced speaker system. Sounds like nothing I've ever heard before, but there's a lot more to talk about than just that. I love the functionality, and what I mean by that is I can take my iPad that's got the USB Type-C plug in it, and guess what you can do? You can grab that same cord. It'll also power the device as well. I can plug that right into my iPad, and guess what you have? You've got an external monitor on your iPad, which is super handy. I use it actually a little more than I kind of anticipated. But the real nuts and bolts of this system is when you hook it up to your computer, because it's just one cord. It also powers the computer, it charges the computer, and it makes that work absolutely seamless. The cool part is there's some new technology now that's making it so that you need a little more horsepower in that monitor. I can have all my externals already plugged in, as you see here, an external drive, printer, microphone, all those things. Throw one cord in my computer and I'm in business. The other thing this monitor has, which is super slick, is the infinite adjustability on where you want it. So if you're looking for that next item in your office ecosystem, you might want to check out Apple's new Studio Display. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. It's incredible to see the kind of technology that's moving into the display space. Love to see it. And folks, stick around. We're going to have more This Week in Agribusiness coming up. In fact, we're going to check in on the Eastern Corn Belt with Bill Patterson from Ohio Farm Bureau. Well, there's a lot of policy discussion happening this week in agriculture, and at some points it crosses over into other industries, including the supply chain. Recently, we saw some federal action take place, hopefully to streamline the supply chain, and Max had a chance to get some more details.
Yeah, Mike, during June Dairy Month, we'd be remiss if we didn't take a moment or two to toast the men and women who make it all possible, who milk the cows across America and provide us with the milk and delicious dairy products. And we want to talk about something of interest to them for just a moment as we visit with Cassandra Kubal, who is with the Edge Dairy Farmer Cooperative, headquartered in the Green Bay, Wisconsin area, as I recall. But you work out of Washington, D.C., right, Cassandra?
Correct.
I know you work on a lot of different legislation, many pieces of legislation that are important to the dairy folks, but one that has been of interest here of late has been this ocean shipping bill. Talk with us about that. We understand it has passed and hopefully will make things a little bit smoother in the future for exports.
Yes, we're very pleased to see that the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, which Edge Dairy Farmer Cooperative has long supported, passed out of the House of Representatives and is actually going to be signed today by President Biden. This bill was called to, and actually is something that was much needed, as we have not seen any changes to shipping in the last 20 years, so definitely needed. It provides tools aimed at relieving some of our supply chain bottlenecks that we have been experiencing over the past now we can probably say 2+ years. Which have been heavily affecting the dairy industry, but also the food and agricultural exports at large. It'll provide some real long-time solutions for many of the issues that have been congesting our ports and slowing down our exports.
So some new regulations for the shippers. Give us an example. It's just a kind of a Cliff's Notes version here of what this would require of those folks.
Sure. So it will prohibit ocean carriers from unreasonably refusing cargo space accommodations, something that we've been seeing pop up here and there, where it's been you've been rejected, and they'll be happily send their empty container back, which used to be unheard of, but with prices as they are, some of the foreign carriers in particular were finding that to be more lucrative to do that. So prevent that from happening and discriminating against U.S. exporters. It'll also provide some transparency by requiring the carriers to report to the Federal Maritime Commission each calendar quarter on total import-export tonnage in loaded and empty units per vessel that makes port in the United States. So it's another level of transparency that is added to this. It further gives additional authorization to the Federal Maritime Commission to self-initiate investigations of the carrier's business practices. This is something that the FMC had been lacking, and this is where I think that was a bit of a cherry on top of what we witnessed coming off of the supply chain issues that COVID really expounded upon. So this is a nice new additive to give FMC that additional power to be able to have some additional oversight.
Cassandra, are there teeth in this bill? In other words, sometimes we see regulations passed and an industry can sort of thumb its nose because the fines are not significant, they're not really meaningful. Is this thing really going to be enforced, you feel?
That is a good question. I think you're going to see strong support, whether it's across the administration, from continuation with Congress. What we're seeing next steps here, it's going to get signed today, and it'll go into law and start going into effect by end of July. So to your question, key details on this and where the real teeth comes into play will come through the rulemaking process that will be playing out over the next few months. But as I was noting, there is strong support for this. So I can only imagine that you're going to see, hopefully we're giving real strength to this. So when it is fully implemented, FMC has that power. We have that ability to be able to keep that eye over the ocean vessel carriers.
Finally, lest we forget, dairy exports have become very important to the U.S. producers. And I'm pointing that out simply because I recall not many years ago, the exports were rather insignificant. We didn't pay a whole lot of attention to them. That's changed, hasn't it?
Certainly has. I started in the business over 15 years ago, and it is a whole new world now. Just last year in 2021, the U.S. exported nearly $8 billion worth of dairy products. To bring it back home a little bit more, and I'm from a dairy farm in Minnesota, more than one tanker load of milk out of 7 gets exported by way of cheese and other dairy products. So it really makes an impact.
Cassandra, to you, your family, all of the folks who make it possible, we toast the men and women of the dairy industry during Dairy Month. We appreciate it. Thanks for sharing some time with us.
Certainly. Thank you.
Cassandra Kubal, who represents the Edge Dairy Farmer Cooperative, Mike, and I'm sure you'll toast the industry, maybe with a milkshake or a sundae or even a glass of milk, right, pal?
Well, thank you, Max. And yes, I guarantee my celebration of the dairy industry will involve at least a glass of milk. More than likely, it'll be 3 scoops of ice cream. And folks, it's hard to believe, but June Dairy Month started back in 1937. It was actually began as the National Milk Month, and of course, it stayed that way. And it's a reminder of just how hardworking American dairy farmers are across operations of all different size. Rhode Island, average herd size of 50 head. New Mexico, 2,650 head in each herd. We salute the dairy industry. Keep up the good work.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us here. You know, we have come through a very difficult planting season for a lot of folks across the country, whether it was the drought out west or the excessive rainfalls that fell across North and South Dakota and parts of Minnesota, or just the slow pace out east. Max had a chance to catch up with Bill Patterson, president of Ohio Farm Bureau.
Mike, we thought it was time to check in the eastern Corn Belt area. And we want to sample a crop report and visit a little bit more as well with the president of the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, who joins us this weekend, Bill Patterson. Bill, I have to ask you first and foremost, are the strawberries ripe there in northern Ohio?
We are in the heart. We are excited for this weekend. We've had some tremendous heat. It's Father's Day weekend. Everybody's picking berries for this weekend. So we are excited for Saturday, and we're in the middle of it.
It's one of many crops I know that you harvest on your farm there. What'll be next after strawberries for you?
Well, for us, we go into peaches. We don't grow sweet corn, but a lot of our friends do. We sell a lot of sweet corn. So we're into peaches, sweet corn, the early cooking apples, the one my mom loves to make her pie with. And then we go right into the heart of the fall season, apples, pumpkins, the fall entertainment. So we're on the precipice of getting going.
We know that in the throes of the pandemic 2 years ago, there were many people in our cities who discovered the farms out on the outskirts for the first time ever. And I suppose you're welcoming them back. And many of those folks maybe are fairly new customers, right?
Yeah, Max, you nailed it on the head. I mean, when the concert venues and high school football games and amusement parks and everywhere you might visit, that was all shut down. The farm markets were going strong. We were able to allow social distancing, but entertainment. And so we really built up a client base that we don't want to let go. And so we're trying to offer some things, particularly as the economy goes, a little turbulent times. What can we do? How can we relate to the customers, give them a good value so they keep coming back?
And one thing I was noting the other day, looking over the crop bulletins for your state, if you looked at corn and soybean crops, they appear to be just about on normal in terms of the progress in planting. I would imagine there are some growers, especially in the northwest part of the state. I know some farmers there who would say it's been a struggle.
Yeah, the Northwest and the Southwest. I talked to several of the farmers. We're at a Farm Bureau meeting in visiting Farm Credit and Kentucky Farm Bureau this week. So it's been great. I've been able to talk to some of those, and exasperated, tired, stressed are the words that I'm hearing, particularly those in the Southwest and the Northwest. But I'm also hearing hopeful. I'm hearing a lot of, you got high prices, but every time things are going great, something happens. We had a tremendous storm. A friend and board member, Roger Baker from Wayne County, had a tremendous storm that went through, caused a lot of damage. And so we're taking jabs and taking throws, but we're a resilient group. So we are excited for the year. Nervous, but excited.
Yeah, I would imagine some of your growers are out there in sprayers going up and down the roads. And just a reminder, we need to remind, and you have a lot of urban residents in your state of the fact they need to share the roads and expect a surprise at any moment if you're coming around a curve or up over a hill on a road.
We do. Safety is so important, and those guys are out there, and they're not, at this point, we have no control over when we're out there and how we're out there. And so, we're always praying for our farmers at this time of year. And those guys they're trying to get those fungicides applied. And obviously, as everyone knows how important that is right now. And inch, 2 inch, 2.5 inch rains are not allowing us to dictate our schedule.
Our friend Ty Higgins on your staff was sharing with us there's some new eminent domain legislation in Ohio. Share with us what's going on there.
Yeah, there's a lot of policy. I mean, the policy positives going on right now in Ohio is tremendous. Ohio has historically lagged behind on eminent domain legislation, and we've struggled in Ohio maybe to get where we need to get. So we had a tremendous victory to allow the farmers a little more standing in court when it comes to government and utilities. So we're real happy with the legislation we were able to work out with the government.
It can be a challenge when a highway or a pipeline or utility line is coming through, and certainly the property owners need to be considered, need to be respected, do they not?
You got it, and that's exactly what's going on. There's some court cases going on right now, some land that's in some conservation easements that's being challenged, and just making sure that we have that where we recognize the need for these utilities. There's no question about it, but we also recognize that there's some things we've done as farmers and that we can't allow for, and so we just have to make sure it's the right balance. And this legislation and some other things that we're looking to do, I think, will help more create that balance.
Bill, we hope you have a great growing season ahead with much success this year. We look forward to seeing you along the way somewhere again.
Thank you, Max. Thanks for having us.
Bill Patterson joining us this weekend. Bill is the president of the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation. Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, Greg Solier is in the studio, and Greg, looking out to that Pacific Northwest, does that parade of storms just keep coming?
They continue on, responsible for some of that excess moisture and the runoff as well, with warmth off the mountain ranges in and around Yellowstone. That'll be an ongoing story here for the weeks to come. But here we go, one weather system into the Canadian Prairie. Yeah, that was snow in some of the spring wheat fields you saw about a week to 10 days or so ago, with the next weather system on its heels into the Pacific Northwest, taking in there. But we do get a break, but cool weather, slower crop growth and development. The prod of heat from time to time will continue to make its way into the northern plains. You experienced that over the past weekend. Sharp cold front with showers and thunderstorms on the move with one weather system. We do get another uptick in temperature readings, this roller coaster ride, but at the same time helps to manufacture rainfall. So maybe some additional drought improvement here, but we still need some planning to be complete into areas of the eastern Dakotas. Nonetheless, the next front on the move, cooler air, and the next feature ashore into Washington State. So the beat continues on there through the middle and late portions of the week. Just plain old hot through the valleys of California, as you would expect, desert southwest, but we do get a Pacific front, a little troughiness, some gusty winds, and a drop off in readings temporarily into the valleys of California. For now, early in the week, no real significant sign of the monsoon setup and another run of triple-digit readings, but we'll begin to collapse the ridge with time, and it's all or nothing on these storm clusters, heavy and severe, as they fire up there. Watch those. We get into the middle and late portions of the week with a westward moving and the ridge, if you will, collapsing here, retrograding back, and underneath it, a bit of a south-southeasterly wind flow, and here comes the tropical moisture into the southwestern sections of the country, the old monsoon setup, if you will, up as far north as Utah, across the desert southwest. Watch the downpours as well as the flood potential and the dust too, as the heat continues on across areas of Oklahoma and Texas, and the heat as well, Mike, builds back into the valleys of California.
Greg, in this week ahead, are we going to see some good crop growing weather across the central Corn Belt?
Boy, it's been lickety-split where soil moisture, mind you, has been in the adequate category. Yeah, we are looking and keeping an eye on some of the drier patches over parts of central Illinois, Indiana, back into Wisconsin, northern Illinois. The triple-digit heat that will play out early to middle parts of the week won't help as well. But there's a cold front, and here is this hot ridge right here. But we're able to bring about some rain-cooled air, generate thunderstorm activity, heavy and severe across the western Corn Belt, and a march and a drop off in temperature readings with time expected here, but not before another cluster or two of showers and thunderstorms, heavy and severe. Amazing how these storms are able to at least originate in one particular part of the Midwest. 2 or 3 days later, they run the hot ridge all the way down into the southeastern part of the country. Cool off again expected behind that frontal boundary. This is not the way, mind you, the way the summertime season will go. This kind of heat and dryness as well. It is situated into the southern plains, a bit of moisture into the tropics, into the Rio Grande, and some monsoon moisture as well. The heat is centered in a capped off atmosphere over the lower Mississippi Valley. The wrong time of the year with silking corn taking a hit at 95 to 100 degree heat into the Delta and points on eastward. Here's the next boundary stall on out. Jet stream winds along it. So thunderstorm clusters, a drop in temperatures to the north. Heat is focused here, and a tropical feed of monsoon moisture, Mike, into West Texas and the desert southwest later in the week.
What do you see developing on the East Coast?
Eastern seaboard, again, one weather system, cool air for the northeast of New England, in contrast to some of this midsummer 95 to 100 degree heat into the heart of the Corn Belt. Storm clusters will get going into the western Corn Belt and begin their march into the eastern complex. Not the way the summertime goes with this extended hot and dry weather. Showers and thunderstorms heavy and severe as the warmth for now moves into the northeast and New England. Tropics getting a little busy. That's going to be the caveat into the Midwest. We think in the days and weeks to come, with a feature down here in the Gulf, the heat across the Tennessee Valley, lower Mississippi Valley. Watch the tropical moisture here. The heat continues on. A couple of showers and thunderstorms as well for the Carolinas, Gulf Coast, back into West Texas.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, we're talking weather with Greg Solier. And Greg, you touched on some of the action next week. Who's going to see the precipitation?
Well, a fair amount, and as the week wears on, looks like it's back into where we need it, actually, over the southeastern part of the country. Some dryness and drought-related issues here. Wrong timing for 95 to 100-degree heat with some of those summer crops in the reproductive mode to this part of the country. Severe weather potential, despite being June, continues around this clockwise hot ridge that will collapse with time. And as the week wears on, later in the week, we'll get a good corridor of half to 1, maybe some local 2-inch downpours, and with time later in the week into the Ohio Valley. Look at the monsoon moisture in the southwestern part of the country, spotty in the Pacific Northwest, but a tropical feed as well northward in the northern Rockies as summertime begins on the 21st, Mike, a little bit after 4 in the morning Central Time.
Well, Greg, what do you anticipate in the week that ends July 3rd?
Here is the heat. It is still there. It is locked into a good part of the Corn Belt and the plains. Yeah, this is triple-digit stuff as well, and some of it keyed still in the worst drought areas. Note the below-average Gulf Coast, northeast of New England, and normal temperatures into the Pacific Northwest. Suspicion of some tropical moisture and cloudiness across the deep south and southeastern part of the country. There may be some weakness and perhaps ultimately a feature here. Florida, Gulf Coast, and through Texas. Monsoon moisture here. Otherwise, showers and thunderstorms much needed in this corridor. Maybe not the Red River Valley of the North, but welcome to the northern and eastern Corn Belt, into the northeast of New England. Moisture, too, for areas of the Carolinas.
Greg, Independence Day week of 4th of July. What do you see?
Well, Mother Nature, I'm sure, serving up her own version of fireworks and firecrackers and all that kind of stuff and pyrotechnics. And yeah, you'll get that with this trough here. Look at the heat into the eastern Corn Belt, the eastern half of the country. A dip in the jet across the plains and Pacific Northwest will get this kind of moisture set up going into the northern and central Rockies. Much of the Corn Belt, Midwest, into the Delta. We'll keep an eye on the tropics as well, drying out across the eastern seaboard. Yeah, it's July, but severe weather potential still into play.
All right, and Greg, the week of July 11th, what do you anticipate?
From a temperature standpoint, the heat for now kind of gone relative to July across much of the heartland, even a bit below average up towards the Sioux. The heat lingers Ohio Valley, southeastern part of the country. No real extreme on temperatures expected along the divide and points on westward, but still that buckle in the jet will welcome in some moisture for the Pacific Northwest. Normal moisture here in the southwest. That's probably monsoon. And look at the tropical feed in this trough across the plains into the Ohio Valley northward throughout much of the Corn Belt.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Perfect for Father's Day weekend is a multi-generational tractor from Missouri. 6 generations have been around John Deere's through the years. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. They say guaranteed for 55 years. So you could use one throughout your career, then pass it on to the generation behind you. That's how rugged they are. You get an idea of the colors and the configurations on the website storelock.com. Luella Gregory shared with me with pride the story of the family 4020. It was purchased new by her grandfather, William Fisher, 53 years ago, back in 1969. And her dad, Wayne, remembers it very well. In fact, he has the spec sheet showing it was purchased new in '69 for $9,018. Wayne also recalls vividly the variety of operations performed with that 4020, from disking and planting to cultivating and feed grinding. 3 of the generations of the Fisher family can be seen here, as shared with me by Luella Fisher Gregory, her dad Wayne, her brother Chris, and Luella's boys, Emmett, who was 5, and Henry, who was just 2 months, seen there in Granddad's arms. Luella told me that her dad is a humble man. He wouldn't be bragging about his restoration of that 4020. Well, he doesn't need to. We're proud to share it with you so you can see also just how fine the restoration is of that John Deere 4020 at Truxton, Missouri. Let's get the report now from Big Iron Auctions. We switch to our old friend Mark Stock.
Well, MaxBigIron.com featured a classic muscle car auction earlier this week, selling a 1970 Ford Boss 429 Mustang car for $442,000. Also selling a 1970 Chevy Chevelle SSLS6 for $98,250. This was part of the Butch Siebenthaler estate. These cars had bids from all over North America and beyond. Go to our website for all of those classic muscle car auction results. Now, as we get into next week, we've got some great farm machinery selling. On June 22nd, we have the Dennis Burns Retirement Auction in Hartley, Iowa. 128 items of quality equipment, outstanding lineup of tillage equipment, tractors, including a 2010 Case IH Magnum 210 mechanical front tractor with 2,170 hours. They've got a 2014 Case 340 True Tandem 25-foot disc. They've got a really nice John Deere 750 grain drill. Also selling for Lane Goebel Retirement in Fremont, Nebraska, a 2007 Case CX 240B long reach excavator. They've got two 2020 side dumper 36-foot tri-axle side dump trailers. Well, Max, we are scheduling another classic car auction in September. Anybody with classic car collection they would like to sell, please get a hold of us by going to our website.
Each week on This Week in Agribusiness, we like to take a few minutes and get to know the next generation of agricultural leaders, those who have served in state office at FFA. And this week we're meeting Laura Webker. She's the 2021-2022 Ohio FFA State Vice President at Large. Laura, you've just completed your year of service. What were some of the highlights from 2021-2022?
I would say the number one highlight would be that we were being able to get in classrooms after taking such a long break of being state officers. You know, we were kind of stuck inside for a long time, but now being able to, get out and see students and be able to go to conferences all over the state of Ohio and just see smiling faces, most of the time unmasked. So I would say that's probably the number one joy that I was able to kind of exhibit over my year.
And I understand, Laura, that this convention was the first one in several years that you had the chance to get together in person again. What was the energy level like?
Yeah, it was crazy because a lot of members had never even been to a state FFA convention before, since our last one wasn't since 2019. So we were able to, just kind of get out there. Everyone was excited. They were stoked to be there. And it was just a really great energy because, most people have never seen that before or ever even really experienced it. A few kids did get to go to national FFA convention, so they kind of saw a similar scale of it, but never at the state level where they were, less people there, but we still had a record about 10,000 people at the state convention in May. So it was still a lot of people all packed in one place celebrating the future of agriculture.
That is a lot of Blue Jackets in one location. Laura, what was it that prompted you to join FFA?
Yeah, so my story is kind of unique because my mom was my agricultural educator. She just finished up year 28 of teaching ag ed. So I kind of would say that I was born into the blue jacket quite literally. Whenever I was a child, I had a very small one that someone personalizedly made for me. So I would say that's definitely what prompted me to get into FFA, was that my mom was my teacher. So I don't think she was going to let me skip by without getting involved in ag ed. And looking back, I'm very thankful that she let me grow up quite literally in the blue jacket.
That is fantastic. Are you going to be the next generation of ag educator?
Unfortunately, no. I've decided that I want to choose a little bit of a different career path. I think kind of teaching, but more so on a different standpoint. I'm hoping to attend, or I will start attending in the fall, Oklahoma State University to double major in agriculture communications as well as agriculture business, with the hopes of becoming an agricultural lobbyist. So definitely teaching the next generation, but teaching the next generation of policymakers.
Still in the field. We wish you the best. Laura Webker, ending or past 2021-2022 Ohio FFA State Vice President at Large. Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness, ladies and gentlemen. Over this weekend, of course, a lot of the men in this audience might be receiving some new ties. Sunday, of course, is Father's Day, folks. If you haven't bought that special someone in your life a present yet, now is a good time to do so. Joining me to talk Father's Day and reminisce a little bit is Max Armstrong. Max, thanks for joining us.
Well, Mike, I was thinking about it the other day. It's not a happy day for everybody, as is the case for Mother's Day. Sometimes folks never knew a father, or they had a strained relationship with a father, or perhaps conversely, they loved their father dearly and just lost him recently. But I think you and I were so blessed. My dad, a sharecropping, hardworking Indiana farmer, did a lot of things for other people. I learned about that after he passed away. He was sneaking around doing stuff for others, and there was something pretty neat about what Jim Armstrong did. Mark Pearson was a guy revered by many. Your dad was a special man.
He really was, Max. He really was. And it's hard to believe this year marks 10 years since we've lost him suddenly from a heart attack in 2012. And I tell you, it was his passing that allowed me the opportunity to dip my toe into ag media. And in so doing, I've met so many great folks, you, Orion, so many other people throughout this industry. But at the same time, Max, now that I'm finally following my father's footsteps in this career, he's gone, and I'd love to be able to turn to him for advice, and I'm sure there are folks out there. We see this a lot in agriculture and in farm country. When Dad leaves, that crucial piece of information about the operation oftentimes goes with him, and it's nice to have a weekend to remember it a little bit, isn't it?
Your dad had a great sense of humor, and his legacy lives on, to be sure.
It certainly does, and I hope it continues for some time. Max, I hope you have a very happy Father's Day weekend.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Well, thank you, Max. And folks, tune in next week. We'll have more coverage of all things impacting agriculture, so don't miss out. We'll be right here, same place, same time, next weekend for This Week in Agribusiness.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.